I spent 1 week living with a native Spanish family. And in this video, I'm going to talk about if immersion is actually a good way to learn Spanish or not. If immersing yourself in a Spanish-speaking household or a Spanish-speaking country is actually a good way to get fluent. If you don't know me, my name is Hamid. I'm 15 years old and I became a polyglot at 13 after getting fluent in Spanish after summer of 2022. And I got to a conversationally fluent level. Not perfect, not very quick, but conversationally fluent. Here's how I sounded before that summer.
Hola, estoy comiendo comida. Voy a mejorar mi español y yo quiero entender programas de televisión en español sin subtítulos. Sí.
Y ahora puedo hablar español muy bien. Bueno, cada video digo la misma cosa. Cada video hablo de, hablo español muy bien y puedo hablar con los nativos y además puedo, no sé, tengo un acento más o menos bien desarrollado. So as you heard in the intro, I was able to get conversationally fluent. And it was the 7th grade that we got fluent. And so around a year after that, I spent a little time speaking Spanish with natives on an app called Hello Talk, where I would just speak Spanish. And eventually, our Spanish teacher, who was from Spain, in 8th grade, she talked about a potential trip to Spain, a language exchange, which was at her old school in Spain. She had been talking with them, and that our class, the 8th graders, would have a language exchange with their class, such that we would travel to Spain and live with our language partners at their home. And then they would come to Sweden, where we are, to live with us and just travel Sweden essentially and also like get immersed in Sweden. So after I heard that, we had to like raise some money for the trip. So we went around selling cookies, and before then we got the numbers of our Spanish partner. And yeah, I was talking a bit with my Spanish partner. It was the day of the trip and we traveled to Spain. And I've been trying to practice my Spanish a little more, but the thing is, their accent there, because it was Sevilla, which is a place with like where their accents are extremely heavy. My language partner's mom actually added me on WhatsApp and was talking to me and sent me some messages, and I was speaking to her like on voice messages. And the way they spoke was with a very like heavy accent, and it was kind of hard to understand. I'm gonna tell you how it was speaking with them in Spain, because at this point, I was conversationally fluent. I was able to speak with natives, but I was not like native. I'm not at a native level even now. I'm able to speak with a pretty decent accent, I think, and I'm able to, like, I can understand maybe 80-90% of what people say, and that is enough for me to have a conversation with a native. And in Spain, in their household, they barely spoke any English. My Spanish partner did speak English though, so I was able to speak English with him when I needed to. But it was kind of weird. In the house, he would only speak Spanish with me. So the entire time I was literally like, it was a complete immersion in Spanish because I was staying at their house. My experience was that I understood very well what they said. Granted, they did definitely speak slower than they usually do. Even when they spoke with each other, I was still able to understand. But what surprised me was that it still challenged my Spanish, which is a good thing. When it comes to outside of the family, when it comes to buying things in Spanish in Spain, that was super easy. That was just me speaking with like the shopkeepers. Like obviously I can tell you how much does it cost, blah, 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 blah. They would ask me like, where am I from? And I'll explain why we have a language exchange, blah, 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 right? That was not that hard. In terms of just speaking like with the people, with random people, it was that I was able to understand and I was able to speak, but I wasn't like one of the natives, do you mean? It showed that I wasn't like a native, but I was still able to speak Spanish, do you mean? It was exactly what I said. I was conversationally fluent. I was able to have conversations. But in terms of learning Spanish, it is literally the best thing I've ever done, because it was a constant challenge. It was a constant test of my Spanish. You see, the way I got fluent was through essentially 2 exercises that I did. Transcript training and narrate, elaborate, contemplate. So transcript training essentially was listening to natives speak, and as natives spoke, I would try understanding what they said using translators and like using different apps, right? Like DeepL is like a translating app which translates phrases and words. So I would use that. I would essentially study native Spanish content by using DeepL or other websites to just be able to understand what they're saying. Essentially, listen to native Spanish speakers when they speak and then try to understand what they're saying. That is transcript training. And I repeated that so much. I understood an entire hour of Spanish content. And narrate, elaborate, contemplate is just my framework to speaking Spanish. And then again, when I don't know how to say something, I go to DeepL and I translate the phrase that I don't know how to say, and then I say it. Okay, those are the two exercises I used. And the reason why was because the equation to get fluent, this is what I call the fluency equation, is speaking times understanding. Because a Spanish conversation fundamentally is I speak, you understand, you speak, I understand. And in the household, that's all I really needed to do. I had to speak and know what I'm saying, and they had to speak and I had to know what they're saying. And then obviously they have to know what I'm saying, but they're native, so obviously they know. But the thing was, living with them and having just regular conversations with them was literally a fusion of these two exercises. Because a Spanish conversation is essentially just these two exercises just done over and over again, right? And what I discovered was I had to still go on DeepL sometimes to translate a word that I needed or translate a phrase that I didn't really know how to say. And that got me to be able to over and over again, I was able to challenge my ability. Furthermore, my accent even got more developed because my accent started sounding like them. And the reason why I started sounding like them is because you imitate what you hear, right? You become like the people around you. So because I started getting immersed in their accent, even though my accent, I'm not trying to learn the Spanish accent, I started almost speaking like them. And I made my accent sound even more native. I also even started speaking faster, and I noticed I sounded more native myself. And actually, this reminds me of how this YouTuber named Shaoma got fluent. Before I even got fluent in Spanish, I would watch different videos on how to get fluent in Spanish. And this guy got fluent in 20 days. And all he did to get fluent was he would speak all day, every day. He would speak with natives and have conversations with natives. Because think about it, to get fluent is to speak and understand Spanish, right? So all he did was speak and understand Spanish, because a conversation is just speaking and understanding. So he did that 8 hours a day or something crazy. He did that essentially all day, and he got fluent in 20, 30 days. And so the best exercise to get fluent in Spanish is to have conversations with natives. Even that, when you were a kid, there's one fact of the universe that is true, is that you're fluent in your own native language. That's something that no one can take away from you. So how did you get fluent in your native language? Well, you were immersed in the language. You were always listening to native Spanish content or native English, I guess. And you kind of sort of imitated what your parents said or people around you, and then you'd speak it, right? And so the same thing applies when it comes to learning Spanish. And that is why we say kids are good at learning languages, because their method is superior. And so this method of immersing yourself in Spanish is extremely effective. And that is literally the whole way that I got fluent. The whole method is essentially that I would listen to natives speak and I would try understanding them. And I would speak and try to speak like a native, and I'll try to understand how to say something. And those are literally the two ladders to climb. I call them the lur ladder and the sir ladder, right? Listen, understand, repeat for lur. Sir stands for speak, understand, and repeat. These are just how I think about it, at least. I have videos on YouTube where I go through these methods and how these work. But when it comes to just Spanish immersion, it is literally the best way to get fluent in Spanish, period. Nothing better, okay? The only bad thing I can say is that they don't explain things. So if you're trying to learn from a native Spanish speaker, you're not going to learn well, because the native Spanish speaker isn't going to explain certain concepts for you. And the way you remember things is by understanding why it happens, right? Because when you understand why something happens in Spanish, then it clicks in your brain. And when it clicks in your brain, when you get that aha moment, then you remember it more, right? People talk about how they're visual learners. I talk about this all the time, right? People talk about how they're visual learners. They learn in a specific way. It's no, you don't learn in a specific way. We all learn in the same way. It's just that when something is visually shown to you, then you understand it better. And when you understand it better, it makes more sense. And when it makes more sense, you remember it for longer. You remember it better. And so the one thing about that a native is that if you ask a native, why? I remember one time when I was on Hello Talk and I was searching for a language partner, I said something wrong in Spanish. I said, I'm going, I need to go. Tengo que ir, right? And she said, no, you have to say tengo que irme. And I was like, wait, why? And then she was like, I don't know, but it's irme. And now I understand that, oh, okay, it's reflexive. That's why. There's a reason why it's irme, to go or to leave, right? But back then the native didn't explain that to me, so I had to learn it myself. And that is why you can't just get fluent by just being in a native Spanish country, even though that is the best. If you were able to move to Spain or any native Spanish country, that would be really good, but it wouldn't be flawless. There definitely are some flaws. Luckily, I had already understood most of the grammar rules and why sentences in Spanish are how they are. And so all I had to do is just repeat these exercises, aka transcript training and narrate, elaborate, contemplate. And I literally it's essentially what I did to get fluent in the summer of 2022, but just put into real life. And it was a really good test of my Spanish. So yeah, I would definitely recommend it, and immersing yourself in Spanish is literally the best way to learn Spanish. There's no other way to learn Spanish that is better than that. If you want to get fluent in Spanish in that way of immersing yourself in Spanish and using these exercises that I talked about, transcript training and narrate, elaborate, contemplate, then you can check the description for one-on-one coaching with me. And I hope this video helped you, bro, and stay humble.